Hi guys, I'm Nadia Shimoni and I'm going to be giving a presentation on Alzheimer's disease for Exercise Science 486. So let's start with what Alzheimer's disease is. Basically, it's a progressive disorder that leads to the degeneration of the brain and the nerve cells to die. It's the most common cause of dementia. A lot of the early symptoms have to do with short-term memory loss, and so that can be recent conversations that one's forgetting, the names of people they've recently met, misplacing items, things like that. Medications are available, but it only improves symptoms and slows the decline of the loss of cognitive skills. There is no cure for the disease. Alzheimer's disease is very prevalent with dementia. Dementia is the general term for memory loss and cognitive skills. Alzheimer's disease accounts for 60 to 80% of all dementia cases. It's also the sixth leading cause of death in the US. If we look at some of the statistics over here to the right, you can see that while there was a decline between 2000 and 2015 for cardiovascular disease of 11%, Alzheimer's disease had a fatality rate that increased 123. So obviously it's becoming a growing problem. 1 in 3 seniors die from Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia, and more people die from this disease than prostate cancer and breast cancer combined. The exact cause for the disease is not clear still, but researchers and experts believe that it's a combination of genetics, lifestyle, and environmental factors. Ultimately, what happens is the proteins in the brain fail to function normally. It causes communication problems between the neurons and eventually causes them to die and degenerate. So we're going to get into that in the next slide. Let's see here. Okay, so ultimately the cause of the disease is that these plaques and tangles start to develop in the memory part of the brain. And then once they become dense there, they start spreading throughout the entire brain. So plaques are the deposits of protein fragments that build up in the spaces between nerve cells, while tangles are the twisted fibers of protein, specifically the tau protein, that build up in the cells. Now, although these can develop in the average person just with age, people who have Alzheimer's disease, it's a lot more common. They have much more, and it develops in a certain particular kind of pattern. Okay, so Alzheimer's disease has a wide variety of symptoms. So the most common that you think of is probably memory loss, difficulty performing familiar tasks, so things like getting breakfast in the morning, dressing yourselves, going to the bathroom, remembering to brush your teeth, like simple tasks. Problems with speech and confusion with time and place are also very common. Decreased judgment and thinking skills, misplacing things, lack of motivation. But another big one that seems to change more towards the severe stage is changes in mood and personality. Okay, so there's 3 main stages of Alzheimer's disease, and the first stage is the early stage. This is when cognitive impairment is in a mild form, basically forgetting recent names, short-term memory loss things, misplacing items, that sort of stuff. The middle stage is when it's moderate impairment of the brain, and that's when people start to forget and recognize their family and friends, as well as they can like wander off, get lost, forget like what they were doing. The late stage is the severe cognitive impairment, and that's when someone will start developing delusions. So someone might wake up and think, oh my gosh, I have to take the kids to school, when their kids are grown up now and moved out of the house, or think they have to go to work when they've been retired for some time now. So how doctors diagnose this is with CTs, MRIs. If you look here, I'll have to move my camera, you can see the difference between a normal and an Alzheimer's disease brain. But the doctors will also commonly test for the tau protein levels in a patient. And if these are high, they might be able to infer from that that they need to have a CT or MRI because they could be having all these tangles developing in their brain. Another thing that the doctors will do once they've diagnosed someone with Alzheimer's disease is give them the MMSE. This is the mini mental state examination. It's a 30-question test, and basically it focuses on 8 different parts of basically thinking skills, and how it's scored is anything 24 and above is normal cognitive thinking. Anything 19 to 24 means you have mild impairment. 10 to 18 is moderate impairment. And then 9 or anything below that means that they are in like the severe stage of Alzheimer's disease or dementia or have these cognitive problems. Okay, so the effect of exercise on Alzheimer's disease. Physical activity is very important because it's going to get the blood flow going into the brain and giving the cells the nutrients they need. It's also going to increase the amount of beneficial chemicals. There's chemicals in the brain that actually protect it and will prevent or slow down degeneration or the aging of the brain, really. So those who are more active are less likely to have mental function decline. Exercise improves memory, thinking skills, and it will delay the disease's start for those who are at risk for it. Exercising early in the day is going to be important, especially when we get to the case study in a bit, because someone with Alzheimer's disease is going to have trouble focusing and remembering what they're doing. So earlier in the day when they're not fatigued from the day's events is going to be their most productive time. Okay, so some risk factors we have are obviously age. The older you get, the higher chance you have of developing the disease. Poor diet has actually showed in a lot of research that people who have Alzheimer's disease have these high levels of homocysteine, which is a kind of amino acid. Eating a lot of folate and B vitamins helps to keep these levels low. So things like broccoli, asparagus, fish, poultry, eggs, they're going to help in actually preventing the disease. Smoking, like anything else, is going to increase your risk. A sedentary lifestyle, you need the blood flow going to the brain and everywhere else. Now, genetics are also, researchers are very convinced that there's a strong correlation. However, it's very complex and they haven't been able to explain it yet. Now, they've noticed with this APOE gene that there's a variation E4 that people who have Alzheimer's disease tend to have this E4 variation. However, just because people have the E4 variation doesn't mean that they're getting the Alzheimer's disease. And then poor sleep patterns and head trauma or any head injuries are also risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so medication and management. Again, there's no cure. Exercise is very important in slowing the decline of mental function. It'll slow the aging of the brain. In regards to the medication that doctors prescribe for those with Alzheimer's disease, people who are in the mild to moderate stages typically are prescribed the cholinesterase inhibitors, and these basically prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is important for memory and thinking skills. However, as they progress towards the end of the moderate stage, the body stops releasing acetylcholine, and basically preventing the breakdown of that is not helping them. So now they're in the severe stage, and the medications that they'd be prescribed are for regulating glutamate, and glutamate is what leads to the death of a lot of brain cells and neurons. Okay, so for my case study, we have Mr. Q, who is a 75-year-old man. He has a BMI of 22.9. He's 5'9", at a healthy weight of 155 pounds. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease over a year ago in 2018. His father had suffered from dementia in his later years. He has a blood pressure of 138 over 92 and a resting heart rate of 72 beats per minute. Even though his blood pressure seems a little high, he has no cardiovascular disease history in his family, and he's never had any cardiovascular problems, so we're not going to be too concerned with that. We'll still give him an aerobic test for his exercise testing, though. So what's been happening with him is he's been having trouble remembering where he is, names, and he's been beginning to get in this habit where he wanders off. It's starting to concern his wife, who's been at his side for the past couple months diligently because she's getting nervous with him. Tasks like dressing himself, eating, and going to the bathroom are just recently starting to become problems for him. He took the MMSE and got a 19 out of 30. This means that he's basically at the mild to moderate stage of the disease. Now, given that my client has escalated to this level of cognitive impairment, he's been put into an assisted living home, which he isn't a fan of. The strangers and the workers there only are adding to his confusion. Okay, so for exercise testing, Mr. Q's goals are to improve his activities of daily living. So we're gonna, things like getting dressed, going to the bathroom on his own. I wanna incorporate for him going on walks outside of the home so that he can get some fresh air, change of scenery. Group fitness classes are gonna be very important for people his age with Alzheimer's disease, as maybe going on like these long walks with other clients in the home is going to help stimulate his thinking and memory. Also finding out what he likes to do for fun as like a hobby or just anything that we could probably incorporate into his exercise prescription is going to be useful in connecting things to his brain, getting his attention and focus by finding this thing that he enjoys doing. So a medical exam will be needed before considering any exercise. We need him cleared by a doctor. Exercise testing is not required by his doctor because he knows we're going to be doing very low intensity, like 3 to 5 on a 1 to 10 RPE scale. But I am going to have him do a 6-minute walk test for a strength and endurance observation on my behalf, because I do think that's what we're going to start with a lot for him, is getting him on these outdoor walks. Okay, so for his exercise prescription, like I said, we're going to have him at a 3 to 5 intensity on a 1 to 10 RPE scale. We're going to have him working out 3 to 5 days a week, preferably 5, so I know he's getting up every day and being mobile, getting his blood going. 30 minutes a day that he does his exercise workouts is what I'd be prescribing. This can also be split into 2 15-minute sessions, at least initially. This will be long enough for him to gain his focus, but not too long as for him to get sidetracked and lose it. So his exercises are going to be movements of easy nature just due to his physical and cognitive capabilities. Like we talked about, walking, something standard. Stationary bike, we can work on his endurance, but he's still in a safe, balanced environment. And bed yoga, which is very important for older people in general. They're in a good position where they can get up and down easy. But also, this is really going to improve their flexibility and balance. But meditation is so important, especially with Alzheimer's disease. Just the focus and concentration and making your mind think. In conclusion, the biggest benefits are going to occur from an active lifestyle, a good diet, and meditation. There is no cure. There's tons of research and studies going out, so hopefully soon. But I think for us as healthcare givers, it's important for us to remember that compassion and patience is going to be the best thing we can give to our clients, as especially like a disease or condition like this, it's very frustrating for them. Okay, and there are my references, and thank you guys. Hopefully you learned something.